Bible says, the message of the cross. Well, guys, hope you are all well, doing good. It has been a good month or so. This is Brian Sumner. Welcome to the Foolishness podcast. I know there's so much going on in the world. We've talked about this for a good 2 years because there really is so much going on. But actually, there's always something going on with all of us. We're always carrying something. We're always hearing something. We're always facing something. And the Bible tells us, believers, that the just shall live by faith. Whatever you're going through, whatever's outside our walls or inside our hearts, it's all about faith. And that reminds me of just the other day, looking at Luke 10, one of my most favorite Bible stories, where Jesus comes to the house of two women, two sisters, Mary and Martha. And why this is amazing, and I wanted to intro with this, is because we see this response from both these women. The Savior's there. They both call him Lord, but they both respond in different ways. And it starts off in that verse telling us clearly that Mary fell at the feet of Jesus and listened to his word. No matter what was going on, we don't know, but it was about Jesus. She was seeking first the kingdom, we can say, but the Bible says next, but Martha was distracted. She was distracted by something good. She was serving. She was maybe doing the things that we like to do. But Jesus even confronts this thought because she's off in that moment. And he says, Martha, Martha, you are troubled by many things. Listen, guys, but just one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that. I can be sitting here in Christ, thank you, Jesus, or my brother today, and the things we've already talked about, thank you, Jesus. But are we sitting at his feet? Do we realize what we have access to? And I say that because Jesus, Mary, and Martha, Mary chose to worship Jesus. She fell at his feet. Martha could have done that, but she was distracted and caught up. And I hope that today, as we get into this, you realize that all that you need was given to you on that cross. And this is a segue for me because that intro leads into, we're going to do a whole episode today on worship. I invited my good friend over. He is a worship pastor, an amazing singer. He's a husband, a father. He is an eager to get back on the mats, jiu-jitsuist, but he's a good brother of mine. So be praying for that for him. But and he's got a cool name, Mr. Brian Albright. How are we doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm glad you know me because I can go so many places. And even in your intro, you're like, hey, this is very Brian-ish. But one of the things important for our listeners to get today is worship isn't just a guitar or an instrument or a voice. It's everything. It's seeing your kids run in just a moment ago and you loving them as a dad. It's you and me setting up a Zoom. It's your job. It's whether you have a terrible voice like me, even though God loves it. Worship is just the way that we live. So I guess for you, as the worship pastor at our church, as now, how old are you?
I turned 32 on Sunday.
So you're still a baby, but for you,
Yeah.
you've had enough of a journey. Let's just start with, I want our listeners to hear you, your life, and we'll get to where now you're this worship leader and it's a joy, it's a blessing, but it's definitely, Lord, show me how to live this life. So where did this all begin for you? Southern California?
Yeah. No, I haven't moved too far from where I've really grown up. Yeah, I would say I initially fell in love with music, and music has always been a part of my life. I don't come from a musical family, but my dad, he curated some pretty cool albums for me at a young age. He like slipped me the Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon. He slipped me some sweet country records. He got me into the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and all that stuff. And so kind of in that, 11, 12, 13-year-old age, I like fell in love with electric guitar. All I wanted to do was just play rock and roll. I would play with anybody who would let me. I had played, other instruments in grade school, violin and trumpet and all that stuff.
Okay. So music theory was there. You understood music.
Yeah. I could read music a little bit better than most guitarists, but but I didn't get too far down that line. Really, when I started to discover music as an expression of worship is when I began to walk with Jesus. And that happened in early high school age when I was in 8th grade, a freshman in high school. I began attending a youth group. My cousin actually invited me, and I didn't really know anybody. It's funny being a pastor and being kind of just at this stage of life. I'm a rather confident and
Yeah.
kind of type A personality. I don't mind meeting people. I'm not shy around people, but at that age, I was pretty intimidated and afraid to make new friends. And so what I would do is I would just go. I get dropped off early.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why, but I think I just remember getting there maybe half hour before group would start, and our youth group had a band, and so they would be practicing, and I'd just sit there
Mm-hmm.
and listen, and I was fascinated with it.
But you could play already, or no? Or you would
Kind of.
just,
I was still pretty new at that point.
yeah. And
But it
would you
was
say you're a
in
believer? Would you say I believed yet, or you didn't even really know?
no, no.
Okay, cool.
I was just hanging out.
Yeah.
And it was, it was like fun. And at that age, I don't know how it is today, but at least for me at that age, I hadn't formed a worldview that could really oppose
Mm.
Jesus. So I
Yeah.
wasn't offended being in youth group, but I
Yeah.
was just interested and happy to be there. And so the guys in the band just asked me if I wanted to kind of hang out and sit on the stage and maybe
Wow.
bring my guitar and kind of like strum along while they're practicing. And as a lot of worship leaders find themselves in these situations, it quickly becomes you filling in because there's inevitably somebody that doesn't show up or somebody that can't do the next week, and the roster's pretty light. And so, like, can you do next week? Um, and so I actually kind of found myself leading worship
Mm-hmm.
as I was discovering who Jesus was. And
Hmm.
um, in a youth group context, I think it was kind of a safe place for that. I wouldn't necessarily just have, somebody who doesn't believe walk up and lead a whole church
Mm.
like that. Um, but it was cool because it was like the language of worship actually is what allowed my heart to be opened to
Mm.
to Christ and to the Lord and to the truth. And
Yeah.
so it was very soon after that I more or less had kind of this prayer of confirmation in my own heart. I didn't take like, a sinner's prayer. I didn't have like this like moment, but
Yeah.
it was almost like Jesus, I have been walking with you, haven't I? I have been believing, haven't I? Can you
I
confirm
guess
that
I
for
do
me?
believe this. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
So
No, but that's amazing to hear because you don't hear it too much because it's more like someone's on drugs, someone dies, someone's in a crazy experience. I got to figure out what's happening. Were you more like introvert kid? Did you have friends you did sports with, or you more just like hung out with the family? And then this kind of became, okay, these folks are cool.
Yeah, I'm not normally an introvert, but I'm introverted in new environments. So some people jump right into new environments and
Yeah.
they're all out. I am like really comfortable in my own space and with my own friends and people I know. But when I step in a new place like church or whatever, I don't
Mm-hmm.
throw myself out there. And so I come across as, introverted, and then quickly I become,
You're outgoing and
I'm
part of it.
outgoing, I'm really comfortable, I become friends with a lot of people. So quickly in church, like
Yeah.
I was super comfortable in youth group. Youth group growing up was where I would hang out. I didn't
Amen.
really fit in at my high school. I didn't really enjoy high school. I kind of
Mm.
fizzled out of sports and got really into music and was interested in ministry. So I was volunteering at church all the time. I was always there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
just thinking because the idea of going there, hearing, and I guess it's maybe the lazy guy in the band who's like, I'm probably going to be gone, 8 times the next few months. Which kid would look pretty cool up here? He picked you. So now you're strumming away, you're playing. You probably haven't got into too much because you're 13, 14, but did you go through any kind of battle in, okay, I'm going to take this thing really serious, when you start noticing girls or when your friends are doing things, or were you just locked into church the whole way?
No, I definitely was not that I wasn't that mature in my thinking of music at
Yeah.
that point. I enjoyed it, and when I try and like reflect on how I was at that point, I was definitely like there was definitely like the appreciation for it in worship, but there was also just me wanting to like be cool and play guitar and have people
Yeah.
see me.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of working that out at that age to begin with, no matter
Yeah.
what kind of skill or talent you have. But
Whatever sport or whatever you do, it's all
right,
why you doing it. Yeah.
100%.
Puberty. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it was around like 16, 17 that I was really serious about music, specifically. I
Mm.
really fell in love with recording. I producing music, like that
Yeah.
was at an early age. I scrounged up enough money to buy like an old laptop on eBay and learn how to record drums and, all this stuff. And so creating music was always a passion of mine. And I knew I wanted to go to school for that at least. And I didn't really know if I wanted to, I didn't have aspirations to be a pastor or to be in any kind of ministry, but I loved that environment. I loved serving in church.
Yeah, and you
And
can
that was
create and put
still,
people
even
together.
10, 15 years ago, there wasn't the industry around ministry and worship ministry that there is today. So the thought of like getting a full-time salary to be a worship pastor was kind of, there was only a few places where that might work out, So yeah, it was actually visiting a friend who was a student at Biola and staying with him and meeting his friends and seeing the kind of community he had at that school that made me want to attend a college like that. So I actually went to Biola because I saw the kind of community and friendships that he had. And it was in that process that I really, through applying and through kind of like getting into college, that I discovered maybe there's a pastoral gift that's worth exploring and seeing how that would work with music.
Yeah, because it is managing people, it is doing things, and I know our church had 3 services, went to 2. We're going to be doing a night service, but a lot of churches, the worship person is just the one woman that could sing at the potluck, and they're like, "You're that woman." And I tell you guys that because I go to those churches, and it's then her and a nephew, and it's all worship. I mean, it's beautiful, but it really became then a profession. So you're 13, this goes on. When did you start taking on that role as a worship pastor where you're like, because I get it, you're saying it, the production side of it is huge.
Right.
If that's part of your character, that's a big thing. When did that really say, this is the church I'm going to be part of, this is my life now? And
so I would say going to school, going to like college for being trained in ministry is interesting because obviously they want to give you the skills to use in church, to be hired by a church. It's kind of an interesting thing. It's like,
stuff for me to
like,
hear.
let's get you placed in a job at a church. And so, there was a lot of there's a lot of like conflicting thoughts in my mind, actually, like as I was going through school and as I was kind of coming out of school, because the academics and like, learning how to be a worship pastor, just learning all these skills. It's like learning, the skills of being a musician and kind of like the practicals of ministry. What you don't necessarily gain is the heart for pastoring and the anointing that might have from God, and school's not meant for that, but it's hard to see that when you're in the thick of like college and when you're young. And so it was really my first job out of college at a church that I just say that God really carried me through some choices that I couldn't see for myself. God was kind of laying out my steps and really protecting me through it all. And I found myself in this full-time job at a church leading worship. But there was a worship pastor above me. So it was a large church and I was one of the worship leaders there. And he became a mentor to me and really showed me the pastor's heart of a worship pastor. And he was incredibly talented. He was just a great artist and songwriter and guitarist and all these things. But above everything else, he cared that people would seek Jesus. And, it's people will, when we talk about worship is more than just music, they'll reduce it down to saying worship's a lifestyle. And I would say, I'd reword it to say, worship is how we orient ourselves toward God. And this guy just always would orient his life and help me orient my life toward Jesus. And he did that in like this beautiful artistic way. He kind of speaks like Yoda. He just speaks in like these like metaphors and just like poetic language that I'm always like,
is he that green guy I keep seeing you hang out with?
Yeah, exactly. But it was through that I just learned and was really seeking the Lord to help shape in me a heart for people to encounter the Lord and to seek the Lord and to be close to the Lord and to match that with my practical gifts with music and all of that. So that's kind of how I found myself in this role at my church now, at our church at
Yeah.
Branches, is another one of those things where the Lord's just, guiding my steps, and I step into the role. And right when I
Yeah.
did, our whole church kind of like was in a huge transition, and the Lord just said, "Hey, like, this is what I have for you." And that's kind of how I stepped into this role to build the culture that we have at Branches.
Yeah, just because I remember speaking even years ago in the East Coast, and it was like a very reformed church. I'd never really been in there. And I'm debating at that time, when am I going to go to a seminary? What do I need to do? What am I missing? And the pastor just had me preach, and I preached this serious message. And afterwards, I was like, do you think I need to go to seminary? And he said, Brian, it's not what you learn when you get in, it's what you learn when you get out. And so it's almost like you learn the
Right.
cushion. You could already read music. Paul McCartney to this day tells you he can't read music because he doesn't
Right.
want to get in the rhythm of his flow. But it's true. And Bruce Lee used to say there's no actor but the action. So here's Brian Albright. I'm speaking to the younger generation. You're going to your seminary, you've got your friends, it sounds cool. But when you go to church and the grandma's on the bench, or I'll say this for my wife with her mom passing away, I always try and encourage you with this, not intentionally. You will have to share 2 or 3 minute little things in the middle of songs or your intro. And when a person comes in church and they're hurt and they've lost someone and whatever's going on in their life, broken marriage, the worship sets the tone for receiving the word. So the little things that I've heard you or one of the girls or someone say, knowing my wife is there and she's fragile, that's pastoral. That's what sticks out to her all week. And then obviously the preaching and the rest of it. But it really has to be a pastoring heart. And I love that you said earlier, even in your testimony, kind of, it wasn't that I was an unbeliever, because people will bring amazing musicians who aren't believers, who are raging on Saturday night to come in and play worship. And I'm like,
Right.
I get it. But what you're saying is that there's no one in this church gifted enough, or our pride is so high that we can't just have like, the guy with the 4 chords play. He's got to be like,
Right. Yeah.
whatever. So this is all going on. So then now, obviously, and I can feel that heart in pastoring. But I think it's important people to understand this, because Brian, you know this, and this is kind of a confession for me. I can play guitar, right?
Yeah, I've seen you play.
But can I really play guitar?
With enough practice, absolutely.
So that's faith right there. But my point is this, is that we all have gifts, and that word for gift is, charisma. So if I look at you, I'm like, that's a worship leader, that's a pastor, and he can sing. There's people that are listening thinking it's only about worship, but no, in the Bible, Peter tells us in 1 Peter 4:10, as each one has received a gift, that's the word charisma, use it to serve one another. So Brian showed up to church, strummed that guitar, had fun with this community. His gift would make room for him. And he goes on and says, Peter, in verse 11, whoever speaks is one who speaks the oracles of God. Whoever serves as one who serves by strength that God supplies. So I'm saying this to kind of pastor our listeners as we get deeper into your story. A lot of people ask the question, what am I meant to be doing with my life? And I would ask all of you to say, what are you naturally gifted at? I can get specific things done, but I would hate to oversee a church because I don't think administratively, like you or Pastor Andrew. You started playing music, it made way. I got pushed onto a stage and began to share out of fear, and the Holy Spirit, and as you said, the anointing met me there. I say all this to say, because you're leading into this, but we're not sitting in Galilee 2,000 years ago. We're not on the
Right.
shores, of the Jordan. A worship leader back then would have been different than today. We have 9 to 5s. What would you look at as a worship leader being in today's culture? We're in America. We have limited time. How do you look at that whole picture, just
Oh
to help
man,
people see? Yeah.
that's a great question. I think that the right answer gets distorted in
Mm,
many ways. And what I see, at least from where I'm standing, worship pastor of a small church in Huntington Beach. There's
yeah.
hundreds and thousands of churches all around, right? But at least what I can kind of see is there is beginning to be a transition and kind of a movement away from just song leaders as worship leaders.
Mm,
And there's a place for music, and I'll kind of specifically answer your question here in a second,
yeah.
but
Go wherever.
just to speak to how I view music. I mean, the the necessity of music, the place for music is established early on in the scriptures. I mean, the people of God have been singing together from the beginning.
Amen.
And it's had a place in their liturgy. It's had a place in their worship, in their gatherings. And I think, when I think of how of why that is, I just think it's because it's such a unifying thing. It's such a unifying language.
Yeah.
I would call music as a spiritual language, because regardless of if we're singing in words or in a language I understand or not, there's something that everybody can connect to and kind of grip onto when it comes to music. And when you talk about it in the context of worship, and even like our modern kind of worship gatherings, music gives the people something to sing together, a message to hold on to together, something that stays with you. I mean, melodies oftentimes will stick into our brain a lot easier than just a plain sentence. There's a reason why in Awanas or Sunday school they put scriptures to songs all the time so that kids memorize them.
And I love them. I love
right.
seeing our a little summer Bible camp, and all the kids are all out of key, singing their hearts out, and I'm at home at dinner singing that song out of key as well.
Yeah, I still got like all of Psalm 103 memorized practically because of Awanas and all the songs I sang.
But that's a very Jewish thing. That's how they did it with the children, because they didn't, you've seen that meme where Skeletor runs away and he said, "Just so you know, the Bible was an audio book first." And he just says, "Till next time."
That's hilarious.
Like, that is funny, because they didn't, they had the papyrus that was so valuable, but they memorized. So yes, singing. Okay, I like where this is going.
I mean, there's a reason that music is even reduced to the word worship. We talk about, hey, I loved your worship, or we loved that time of worship, and it's we're talking about the time of music. But in our gatherings, I think it really truly is important, because it centers us, and it collects us together. It gives us a unified voice.
Humbles us too.
Yeah. And you talk about like, what's the role of a worship leader? What is a worship leader? I would say, it really is to be someone to lead those moments. But if you're talking about the greater purpose of a worship leader or worship pastor, it's someone who's actually going to create and maintain and sustain a culture of devotion within a church. And so that is done not only with music, but with prayer and discipleship. That's a big word that gets thrown around in church. But what I mean by that, it's really just spending time with people and living out your life in a way that kind of rubs off on them, and vice versa, and pushing each other toward Jesus. And also through creativity, through creative works and arts, and through collaborative efforts. I think all those things, and I say those, and maybe whoever's listening can hear those and have maybe an idea in their mind of what that looks like. And a lot of times that can be scaled beyond reach. And you're thinking mega church type, images, or just projects or endeavors that seem really like out of reach and hard to do. But you can reduce that to its smallest form. Someone that had a huge impact on me in my life was a worship pastor who did it part-time, and he was a financial advisor for his full-time job. But he embodied that and lived into it based on what that church needed. It was a small church that didn't have a ton of needs day to day. And so he was able to, he led times of worship on Sundays. He spent time with me and encouraged me and really raised me up as a leader.
Amen.
And he was a creative person, and he would, invite me to write songs with him and to spend time with him and just kind of make music together. He would pray with me. So I don't think it matters about like, if it's a full-time or part-time kind of job. But I think it's a good thing for people who are especially maybe even thinking about pursuing that in their life, if they haven't already, to know that it's not just making YouTube videos of your services or music videos of the songs that you write and that's it. Those are artists. Those are musicians. And they have a purpose too, but they're not necessarily just worship pastors.
You might never meet that person, talk to that person. And I know for you, you just mentioned even in church recently, you were away at like a music event where it was a kind of a conference. Right. And here you are all these years later, and there was just someone that you interacted with that shared something with you practically that still encourages you to this day. And he was, as a brother in Christ, but he was pastoring as well. He was sharing something that mattered to him with you. Voices are one thing, interacting, but like you're saying, it's
Yeah.
community. It's not showing up, because I've spoke at times where I've gone and like the worship band's been amazing, but then they almost just felt like performers. I don't want
Right.
people who suddenly checked their phone afterwards or did whatever, I get it. But I'm saying it can almost just be like, I'm in and I'm out. No, you want this heart of the feel for what's happening. We're gathering. We've been praying. The team's planning. What could God do throughout the whole service? So,
Yeah, exactly. And I would say a great thing that keeps a worship culture in check is when it's for the community and not for beyond the church. Um, you know, I think it's amazing that God can breathe on things and make them bigger than they ever were intended to be. And
amen.
I think there's a lot of really pure movements of God around
Hmm.
this world that I'm thankful for. I
Yeah,
don't sit
yeah.
here and look at things that are bigger than myself and immediately judge them. But what I do is, what I can do at least, and what I should do is always examine my own heart. And if what I'm doing is looking straight through the 200 people that are sitting in front of me, and I'm only thinking about how many people are watching this on YouTube or how many
Yeah,
other
yeah,
people are going to be experiencing this,
yeah,
I've messed up big time. I've
yeah.
missed because really what I committed to do and what I think God really is wanting of me is to love. If it's 5 people, if it's
Yeah.
200 people, but they're here, we're here as a community. I am a huge believer in the local church, and I think it's local church and probably smaller churches that are going to be more responsible for revival in this world than the
Amen.
bigger movements. The bigger movements, if they have pure motive, are gonna be, jet fuel for the whole thing, and it's gonna be great.
Yeah.
But there's millions of Christians in this world that gather in small gatherings and who need pastors who want to love and serve
Hmm.
them and lead them and give their best talents to them, even if it's not for the rest of the world.
Yeah, and again, the internet wins, like that meme of like Neil Diamond, and it's like a 3-second clip, and it's like, I'm a worship pastor. It's all about Jesus, and he spins around
Right.
and he's sparkling with. I mean, guys, just so you know why I'm saying this, I send these to Brian. It might be like 12 at night when I'm done preaching.
Oh
For
yeah.
like 8 hours,
I get
and
all the
so
Instagram DMs.
you
Yeah.
get the worship ones, Pastor Austin gets the youth ones, whatever it is. But here's why this is powerful for people to understand. Once I get to heaven, I am never going to evangelize anyone. In fact, I'm never going to proclaim the gospel as we proclaim it now. I'm never going to serve a poor person. But
Hmm.
worship has always began. I mean, in fact, Adam's denial, blaming God, it's the woman you gave me, was a lack of worship. Satan's rebellion, pride, was a lack of worship.
Right.
All things may by him, for him, through him. So there'll be no evangelism, no preaching, but there will always be worship. And so now picture you're 16, 17. Hey, I'm going into this. Our expectations are high. What, I guess, do you wish you'd knew when your journey began? And I say this and I'll qualify it. When I'm preaching and teaching, and there's a young guy like, hey, I'm thinking about getting into it. I'm going to preach here in a week. I'll tell him, hey, when you mess up, don't stop the service and tell the church you missed your point. Just focus on God,
Yeah.
or like there's certain things that you just learn as a worship leader, you particularly with COVID, when all the technology would shut down or we'd be in this building. What things stick out that you wish you could have just said, 18-year-old Brian, listen, you're going to get through this, but important things, I guess.
Right. Man, if I was to encourage myself, it's a great question. I think that I'm trying to figure out how to articulate it. I think I would just I would tell myself or anybody at that stage that, look, it's not about creating and manipulating an experience, whether it's for yourself so that you feel like you can believe more or have more
Mm-hmm.
faith, or for others. It's genuinely about being honest and honestly and humbly approaching God. And oftentimes that looks like something much more simple than we want it to look.
Yeah.
And so, it's funny. Some of the best songs, or at least, who people who have told me,
Yeah.
this is a song that really speaks to me, are the simplest ones that I've written, and the ones that come from probably the most honest place. And it's not the production, it's not, anything sexy about it. It's like it's really just like the simplicity of the prayer that was real for me and is real for someone else. And so there's actually like an incredible opportunity for young worship leaders if they're willing to just not be so aspirational in the moment.
Amen.
There's a difference between aspiration in your life. Like there's working on your craft, there's becoming great at it. I mean, you're a great skateboarder. You don't necessarily try out like the hardest trick without working it out beforehand.
Yep.
Like you don't go to the competition, or in jiu-jitsu, you're not you're not trying a bow and arrow choke on somebody like day one, right? Like so
So there's working hard at something.
There's
as
working it
opposed to
out
glory.
in your own, in the secret place, as a lot of people will call it, in this place where it's kind of like you have intimacy with the Lord. You're on your own.
Amen.
You're not necessarily accountable for leading other people in that moment.
Mm.
And then there's the moment when you're in front of people where it's like the fundamentals can actually be what wins the war, It's like, now you got me thinking about jiu-jitsu. It's like, if you have fundamentals down, like you can win pretty well, especially against other white belts, right? Like you got the basics down, like you can hold your ground. And so in worship, if you can like understand the fundamental of worship is going to the throne room of Jesus and offering yourself. And you can do that simply and without distracting, like that's a win. So if it is the 4 chords, and if it is the what's the song that's like so popular? There's no place I would rather be. No place I'd rather be, here in your love. That song, everyone does like a 10-minute version of it, and it's like 2 choruses, back and forth. But that can speak to people in the moment. It can be a genuine prayer to the Lord. He can delight in it. So that'd be something I would encourage, especially younger worship leaders, is to work on the craft, your musicianship, your leadership, your pastoral giftings, but to not be afraid to do the simplest thing and let God actually use that.
Yeah, because, putting myself on the spot, I think with skating, you spend so much time, especially when you're an amateur. Brian, you're a sponsored amateur. We want to bring you on the team where you have to hit certain goals. Well, now you're pro. You have to hit certain goals to get a pro shoe. Why wouldn't I want to do this? I'm older. I'm falling in love. I want to make money, all the rest of it. But I feel like me and my Christianity, and I love what we did at the Easter service. Everyone's done up. Everyone's showing up fancy. It's Easter service. And then, our pastor, Pastor Andrew, kind of walks up in like a white t-shirt, like he's just got done with his kids. And he's not trying to be intentionally humble, but there's something in just the very practical, like even this podcast, guys, I'm sitting in my kitchen and the wall's got an old gloss on it from cabinets we ripped down. I'm not saying it's wrong to deck it all out and all the rest, but I feel like you being on what the worship leader God's speaking to needs to hear, he will hear this. If the next episode, it's wherever. So to put that into where you are, you kind of answered it. What things kept you grounded? It's the focus on God and his presence, because, and I'll say this, and I'm friends with a lot of these guys, but the movements we've had the last 10 or 15 years that have been great. They've given us great songs. It's been great to sing along. I personalize them. Some of those songs get attacked. I'm going to change this word. I'm going to do that. But to me, a generation, I'd say your generation, but a little bit obviously below now, they think that's the success when it's not. What I love, it is success. Great. Like you said, that pioneers the move. It brings some new life into things, but that's the danger. The size of the platform, the accolades, the when I walk in the room, this is who I am. No, that guy that ministered to you, that's a blessing. There's treasure in heaven for him, and he found a brother in you, and that's all of it. And I guess I'd say this just because this kind of goes along. Our good friend, Justin Unger, and his friend Josh, they do a ministry, Likewise Worship. And I do a lot of stuff with them where I go in and challenge, encourage them. But one of the things I've heard over and over is that a worship leader can become kind of like a commodity to a church service. I'm planning a church, or I'm friends with Brian. You come in and you just pop up. You'll pop in and pop out. You do your part. You're done. You don't have that kind of relationship with Branches. Andrew was done preaching a few weeks ago, and you'd intro the song he didn't even know you were going to bring in, and it tied in perfectly to his message. So what is a good working relationship for a pastor to have with a worship leader? Whether you say, man, this is best case scenario, or whether you say, I hear the burden of so many of you. You're getting older, and you'll see this, Brian,
Oh
at
man.
40, as an evangelist, and tell this to even people on probably our staff and everything. I'm protective of like the gospel, and I'm like protective of, and it's not my place to protect it, but I'm like, I want people just to hear the truth and go, is it really what the scriptures are sharing? So for you,
Right.
encourage some people. And as a worship leader, you might feel like this, but this is kind of what pastors need to understand as well,
Oh man, you're putting the ball in the tee for me. I could write a book on this,
But
man.
yeah, just as like, you're 30 something now. So just encourage people. And for young pastors to go, that guy is a gift to your church. He has a craft. He
Yeah.
shapes this. So you should write a book on
Yeah.
it
So,
though.
well, to put a little context to where I'm at in that in that relationship and in that kind of situation, I have a very healthy relationship with our lead pastor.
Yep.
And you know, it's interesting because at my age, I have many peers, many friends who have left ministry and who aren't worship leaders anymore, who aren't pastors anymore. And, everyone's got their justification for it. And I don't fault them, but I see a lot of commonalities in their situations. And it usually has to do with poor leadership or a tension in a relationship with someone who's leading the church, and then they get scarred, and then they leave, and they have enough of those experiences, and every church is the same, la-di-da-di-da, and they're out.
Yeah.
And they just don't want to deal with it anymore, and I get that, and I genuinely feel like God spared me. Both churches I've worked for in a full-time capacity, I've had incredible bosses. I've had incredible support. And I've gotten to work with people who just love Jesus, and they do it in a humble way. But what I can speak to as far as what I think goes into that, and what I think is so good about what at least I have currently at Branches, is an incredible amount of trust. And it honestly starts with, well, at least in my case, it started with our lead pastor. It started with Andrew. He knew what he was looking for. And at least from my understanding, I love, kind of hearing in hindsight, like, what was the process like looking for, a worship
When
pastor?
I get him on the interview,
How
I'll
did I
play this
win,
clip. Yeah.
Yeah. But it came down to really someone who valued the mission and vision of the church, and who valued pastoral ministry over like selfish gain and propping up a worship culture just for buzz and excitement.
Yeah.
And I it's more to it than just that, but I'm trying to, reduce it to a phrase.
Yeah.
And so I think very quickly, I gained Andrew's trust, but vice versa, he gained mine, because what we have is a relationship of encouragement and support and appreciation for each other. And that's really true in the staff of our church. I think that's why we have, just a really healthy staff culture in general. Is there's people who are just for each other.
Yeah.
And there's not this, fight for, resources or attention, because we all are for the mission of the church. We believe in the community. And so I think a healthy relationship, what I would say, if someone's looking for a job at a church as a worship leader, as a worship pastor.
That's good. Yeah.
Red flags to me are when they try and attract you and win you over with budgets and equipment and personnel and resources. Then that's the draw for you to take the job, because you're talented and you're a good singer or a good worship leader. And there's nothing else that they're like advertising as good about their community, or it's all kind of second to the resources.
Yeah.
To me, it's a huge red flag, because what that tells me is look, like, they have cool things, and they're trying to, like, get you to come because you can do fun things with the cool things,
Mhm.
and, maybe they'll get a couple years out of you before you're fed up and leave because there's no,
Yeah.
like, appreciation for the people.
Yep.
Um, but what I think is good to look for is a church that says, "Here's our people. This is what's amazing about it."
Mhm.
And, if you really wanna lead them, like, we'll get behind you, and we'll resource you as best as we can.
Hmm.
Maybe that is with a ton of cool equipment, or maybe that's
Yeah, there's
just
nothing
not.
wrong with that. You're not saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. But if they wanna support you with the resources because they believe that you are the person to, like, help lead the people and to pour into people and to actually bring more people into the fold and
Yeah.
not just make it about you, like, that is an incredible situation to step into, and especially if you have a pastor, or a leadership that really trusts
Mhm.
your own devotional life with Jesus enough to, like, let them have freedom in, like, crafting worship sets and picking songs
Mhm.
and even saying, like, "Hey, I think we could do this in our services," and there's an audience for that kind of,
Mhm.
dialogue. Those are incredible situations because then you enter into a culture of supporting each other and you're escaping a culture of performance.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of places like that. And
Yeah.
I'm sure there's even places that are like that that don't wanna be like that and who are trapped in that, and they're trying to, like, work their way out of that, and that's really difficult to walk that back.
Yeah, and I guess I'd say with some of this too, just for those listening, and you can challenge this in a good way. You almost hit on it. But as a musician, okay, I'm freshly saved. So, Brian, do you write only Christian music or is it secular? Even that is the corny statement. Whereas a
Right.
musician, but I say it because Josh Garrels was on and we had a conversation and he's like, I'm older now and I kind of need to say some stuff. And he just made the point. He said something and I'm going to tear it to bits, whatever he said. Forgive me, Josh. I know he checks these out. But he was even saying there was a famous show or something years ago where these secular bands were on tour and one of the bands was a Christian band. And the whole game for the secular bands was to get the Christians to talk about Jesus, but they wouldn't do it. So in the green room, they would always ask questions, but they wouldn't talk about God. And you've even made some references to where things have progressed. But 30 years ago, it was almost like we're going to go and be around you. And we all love Jesus, but we're not going to tell you that. And
Right.
hopefully, when you see that we just enjoy everything as much as you do, you'll be like, it's so cool. I want Jesus. And Josh's kind of thing was like, look, you're writing music, what's coming out of your heart. And I feel this from a lot of these leaders right now that are on the stages. I used to go to events and conferences, 20, 30, I mean, 100,000 people. Some of the
Right.
bands would just play music. And some of them seemed in the last 10 years to really emphasize focusing heavily on their faith and their gospel because they felt like it was being lost. But for you, when you look at music as a Christian, you can write about your wife, you can write about your family, you can do it. But how do you just look at music as a whole? Because you've written albums now, you're producing music, all this. But speak to the musicians just to hear that, because obviously you've opened
Yeah.
your heart and a
Oh,
lot of other
man.
powerful stuff.
Oh, well, the one of the most beautiful things about music in this period of time, in the modern era, is there really is so much
Mm,
freedom to try everything. I mean, gosh, some of my favorite artists are artists who have written both worship music and music that you wouldn't consider worship. You probably wouldn't sing it in church, but it's just
yeah,
honest. It's just who they are. It's their music. Can't even
yeah.
wrap it up in genre.
It's like a testimony,
Uh,
it's their art. Yeah.
yeah. You wanna laugh, just ask any band or artist what genre their music is and watch them, like, just melt trying to figure out how to
Square.
explain themselves, yeah. Well, it's like rock, but it's like indie pop, and it's a little bit of folk, and it's like nobody's comfortable just, like, putting themselves in one box.
Because they
But,
have to nowadays, yeah, sadly.
yeah, I think artistry in music is really important. It's really important to
Mhm.
culture. I mean, even if you look at popular culture, not
Yep.
just church culture, Christian culture, it's artists who have some of the biggest audience and biggest voices. So you
Yeah.
talk about what influences people in one direction or another. I think there's such a place for the arts and for artists to have
Yeah.
an audience and a voice, and I think that there's also I don't think there's any one type of worship pastor, worship leader. I think there's like healthy things for them to like commit themselves to in a church, but
Yeah.
everyone's got their own kind of gifts and even passions. So there's
Yeah.
plenty of people. I mean, Josh is one of those people,
Yeah.
you know, who are incredible artists, but I think that they approach music differently when they find themselves leading in a church gathering than they would if they were like playing a show.
Yeah.
And so for me, you know, me personally, I feel like my life is committed towards writing songs for the church. That's
Mm-hmm.
where I feel really at home. I have written songs that maybe you don't sing in church. In fact, I mean, there's a couple on like our Branches album that like I never
Yeah.
lead in worship services, but I wrote them. I feel like they were valuable. We recorded them. They're
Amen.
out there. Um, but where I really find most of like my time spent and where I get really excited, where I feel really like living into my, you know, purpose is giving voice to the people of God.
Mm.
And there are people that
That's huge. That's a
there's
big
people who
statement.
have like written maybe 3 worship songs and the rest are, you know, songs for them to perform as an artist and bless people in that way.
Yeah.
You know, people talk about going to U2 concerts as like an experience with God. You know, there is
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
like there are spiritual things that can happen
Yeah.
in music and in performative music that, you know, doesn't have to happen in a church gathering.
Yeah.
But for me, I love writing worship. I love, you know, trying to give the community its own voice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that there are different approaches. I think writing music for worship is just different. Like
Yeah.
there's people who want to try and change it and make it more like contemporary pop music. And there's
Yeah.
just things I think are not practical for that. You know, it's like the joke, like, you know, in pop music, people are trying to write songs that are just like, you know, a verse and a chorus, and it's 2.5 minutes, and that's all
Yeah.
people's attention spans are good for on
Walking
Spotify.
through Forever 21 or something. Yeah.
Right. And in worship, it's like, how can we write 4 bridges and make this song 12 minutes? You know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that sounds ridiculous just saying it out loud. But when you are in a room trying to create space to hear from the Lord,
Mm.
patience is an incredible value. And so when you create music that actually lives into that value, now all of a sudden it's not so ridiculous. But
Mm.
it's ridiculous maybe if you're trying to pitch it for the radio.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's different purposes. And I, you know, I appreciate both. Like I'm a huge country music fan. I'm a huge like pop music fan. Like, and the craft of that kind of songwriting is so like amazing to me because people are able to say really powerful things in like 3 words on
Yep. Yep.
and get it done in 45 seconds and you got the point of the song.
About their dog or their drunk
Right.
uncle or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
There's some incredibly, you know, crafty metaphor or whatever. And in worship music, a lot of times it's, man, how do we just be
Mm.
honest and say something that's not new, but fresh and just kind of like from our perspective. You know, God hasn't changed. God doesn't
Yeah.
change. You know, there's probably millions of songs written with like that quote, you know, the Psalm, even though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I will fear
Yeah.
no evil, for you're with me. And, you know, I can already think of 5 different songs that I've sung that have that.
There was one a few weeks ago I noticed because I was driving my
Yeah.
bike, singing it in my head, a different tone, and then you guys sang a song, and I was like, but it's making sense to me because just some of the things you said, I hope people caught. Um, you're going to stand on a platform and lead these people, so you're giving a voice to them to think about it. And like I've
Right.
said, if you come to church and you're divorced, you're going to hear a different part of that song, not because it's about you to everyone who wants to jump on it, but it is about you and Christ and your relationship to him and how he's pronounced himself in the scriptures. And I think it's relevant because when I came to faith as a skateboarder, you might not be skating to third day. You know what I mean? It's like Hallelujah
Yeah.
song. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a great credit song. So we came to faith, like, where's the music that just kind of sounds like everything else? And like you just said, for those watching, if you're on YouTube, you won't see it on the podcast. But then we kind of want to be like, well, we're going to change it so it's not this typical whatever. But it really needs to be both. And what I'm hearing from you is as a worship leader, you're writing songs to lead the people into worship. But as an
Right.
artist, Josh Garrels was a skater, liked all the kind of rap and craziness, and you hear it in his tone.
Yeah.
Yeah, John Mark McMillan does a lot of that. Phil Wickham's
Yeah.
more of a pure worship, or I know Leland and all that stuff. So I just wanted to even get all that take, on the rest of it. And I
Yeah,
guess,
and then that's way more encouraged these days too. I mean, when I was young, younger, when I was like a
you're young.
teenager,
Yeah.
yeah, when I was like a teenager and even a kid, like Christian music was so sterile and just not yeah, I'm sure there's all sorts of reasons for that, but there was also, the church culture looked different. Like Christian culture was really a
Yeah.
punchline for a lot of jokes. The style, the
Hmm.
sound of the music, even
Hmm.
the services, the people, right? It's like Ned Flanders from The Simpsons is like a punchline, right? And so,
Yeah.
it's really like it's really more of these current years where Christian music is its own sound. Christian
Yeah.
artists can have their own following. They can actually like have careers because
Yeah.
they can have support. I mean, independent artists can actually have a life now
Yeah.
because music's been so turned on its head that people are able to kind of,
Yeah.
fund their career just by their fans. It's really beautiful. And then you have
Hmm.
these artists that are doing incredible work. They sound like nobody else.
Yeah.
And now now the sound of you know music for Christians, not just the sound of worship, is
Yeah.
something that's really cool and it's inspiring and it's artistic and it's its own
Hmm.
thing. And
I
I
never really
think
looked at it like that, like a perspective, because it used to be like the middle of America churned out Christian stuff. It went
yeah.
through one of the Christian bookstores. Mom went
Well,
there
the only
after
way to make
school.
it, yeah, the only
Yeah.
way to make it as a Christian band 20 years ago was to like mimic modern music and
Yeah.
be
The
like
Coldplay
the
album or
Shasta
something.
Cola
Yeah.
version of Coke.
Yeah.
It's like it's like,
Brutal
hey,
on a
look,
hot
we're
day.
close to the real thing, but we're not.
When
We don't
really
we
we're
don't
made in
cuss.
God's image and you have this amazing gift and talent. And like you're saying, I say this because, my older sister would say she's not a believer. But when I go over to England, with Calvary Chapel and it's Brian Broderson and that crew, they'll come and visit me. And they're in Cornwall for, 4 days with me. And
Mhm.
when they start playing worship on that stage, and my sisters could say they're music snobs because you live in Liverpool, everyone, you're backstage at everything, all the artists. I mean,
Right, right.
past boyfriends are playing with, Jimmy Page, Jimmy Page's guitarist or this guy, but they go to worship. It's different. I know the YouTube feel and the rest of it, but when you see people singing to an invisible God, when you see people on their knees, and that's to mess with what Josh Carroll said, that's what just telling these people in this room, because I feel like for you, you are bold. I feel like
Mhm.
our pastor is bold. I hope that as a man in today's culture, I stand boldly. So I guess it would be, I mean, I remember when I got baptized, at the ocean, I had two friends there who weren't believers. It's right there in California. They're taking photos, friends of mine, photographers from England. And some people just sang this simple hymn. And they both came back and they were like, it wasn't the Beatles, it wasn't Led Zeppelin, it wasn't, Pink
Yeah,
Floyd, but it messed with them because
right.
the Spirit of God. And I like what you said. You started off saying you were 13 trying to find your identity. A lot of these artists the last few years have gone on tour and toured as Christians artists, but their band blew up or they became famous, but they really didn't have deep roots. And I feel like where we are today, people are kind of aware of that, these movements, because they had a great voice or great whatever. And I've seen it when I'm going to speak somewhere. 20 minutes earlier, the band came on. That kid's wrestling with his faith. He goes out and
Right.
makes a crazy statement on the stage, and there's 10,000 people. And I'm like, what are we doing here? So I feel like God has tightened all this stuff up because the world's in a crazier place. Hearing what you're saying is encouraging. You write worship songs, but enjoy whatever God's doing in your life. So
I've had the opportunity to meet some of these people.
yeah, yeah,
And, in general, like I think anybody who has a lot of attention or who's well known for doing something,
yeah.
they get categorized in one, form. They're Christian celebrities or they're
Uh-huh.
celebrities or whatever. And the immature thing is to just have a blanket judgment of anybody who
Yeah.
has their face on something, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and you think they make lots of money, and you think they're arrogant or what have you. I've met so many of these people who, you know, they're this is their day job. Like, you're
Yeah.
like,
This is
I
the
don't know
machine.
my dad. Like, my dad's an electrical engineer. Like, I've never viewed my dad like that in my life. It's
Hmm.
like any kid who like goes and visits their parents at work, you see like their work version of their parents. You're like, you talk like that? Like, you take a phone call like that? Like, it's really funny, right?
No, this is good to think
This is
though.
how
Yeah.
we get to know people we see on YouTube. It's
Hmm.
like them doing their job. And we
Yeah.
don't see like the incredible friendships or family that they have, the
Community.
kind of
Yeah.
dad or mom that they are, um, and even the kind of life they have with God. I mean, I hope and I pray that like who I am as a pastor on stage is a representation of my life with God. It
Yeah.
ought to be. But if all you're doing to evaluate my relationship with God is judging like the
Mm.
few minutes I'm on stage,
Yeah.
that's short-sighted
Yeah.
because there could be all sorts of things happening that aren't appropriate for me to bring out onto the stage in front of people. I'm not going to just
Mm.
like walk up there and be like, so my wife and I had it out last night.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
I can come up and be honest and be like, man, this has been a hard week for me. I can, there's ways to like be,
Yeah.
I think, transparent and helpful as person that people pay attention to. But it's wrong of us to necessarily like throw everybody into a category. And of course there's
Yeah.
all sorts of news headlines and documentaries
Yeah.
made
Yeah.
of big names that fall
Yeah.
and have these dark lives, but I don't think that's true of everybody.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair of us to like be skeptical, but it's also important for us to be graceful and to be merciful. I mean, like Jesus offers us grace and mercy endlessly,
Yeah.
and we offer it maybe for 10 seconds
And we feel good
to
about
a lot of
ourselves.
people.
I'm
You
gonna
know,
forgive them. I'm gonna overlook something, and we feel better. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So all that to say, I think, there's a two-way responsibility. I think anybody who wants to have a career or finds themselves, a lot of times we find ourselves in these places. There's
Yeah.
people who are famous for doing music who something blew up. They didn't ask for it. Maybe they were
Yeah.
just being obedient to like what God was doing in their lives. Now all of a sudden they have a video with 1 million views and they have a record and all this stuff.
Hmm.
It's their responsibility to steward that well, to live a life
Yeah.
with integrity, to be a
Yep.
good, spouse, to be a good parent, to be a good
Mm.
friend, to be a good business partner, because all this stuff has money involved with it at some point,
Yeah.
right? And it's on us as the church to actually be patient and to be understanding and to be not necessarily, and I say understanding not necessarily to say like, oh, to like let things go, but to actually
Yeah.
like be good listeners and observers, and actually to like let people kind of let themselves come out so that we can understand them more. We put such
Yeah.
judgments
Yeah.
on people when it's too soon, is I guess what I'm trying
Yeah.
to say.
Yeah. I guess I just got protective at times when I'm like, I'd hear you see like 5,000 kids loving this band, and they come up and the guy's decided he's not a Christian anymore. He's announcing it on the stage. I'm like, did anyone running this event kind of like gauge where
Oh
everyone, you
yeah.
know what I mean, spiritually? But you made a point, and I don't want to take you all day, but you did say something amazing earlier. Um, how do you personally, and I know it's through the word, and we're all believers, but how do you personally interact with God? What is that rhythm you feel like when you're like, man, I feel like this song, or I feel like this here? Is there any times it's
Yeah.
super, where is this coming from? Or the times like, of course, this is the Lord, just for you as an artist?
Yeah, man. Well, what's funny is there's something that you and I talked about just like casually one day at church that's
Mm.
kind of stuck with me. And I always felt guilty about articulating my life this way until I heard you say it. And I was like, oh, he thinks about it like this too. But
Okay.
maybe we're both guilty. I don't know.
Yeah.
But we were talking about prayer, and I was talking about how, it's funny because there's a I think a misconception of pastors and even like worship leaders, songwriters, that they
Mhm.
are these kind of like intense prayer, like have these intense prayer lives where they like go to this quiet room and they're just like praying out loud by themselves for hours.
Mhm.
And that's where like all the magic happens in their life, right?
Mhm.
Um, But I've never felt that way, and I've always felt incredibly awkward, and I've always felt like it's unnatural if I just make that my only way of seeking the Lord. Now, do I put it into practice in my life? Absolutely, because I think it's important for me to
Yeah.
pray out loud, to have a practice of prayer. But when I think about praying ceaselessly, there's so many times where I'm like talking with people and they're like, "Hey, can you pray for me, brother?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I pray for them in the moment, but then like when they come to mind, I just go, "Oh Lord, yeah."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like just that. It's like, "Oh Lord, yes." Like when I read something and it's like, "Oh, such and such is sick. Are they going to surgery?" I'm like, "Yep, yes, Lord, be with them." And I'm
Yeah.
like, kind
Yeah.
of like, I've learned that that's can be just as effective, just as important, just as like transformational in my heart if I'm integrating prayer as like a continued conversation with the Lord rather than like, oh my gosh, I got to like cut out, half hour when I
Yeah.
wake up and a half hour here. Um, so for me, like so much of my life has like been learning in my life as a musician, songwriter, worship leader, pastor has been learning to listen and observe and then respond in those moments.
That kind of
So
praying without ceasing idea. Yeah.
yeah, and it's just it's like, even when you're doing a podcast like this, you're like you're trying to listen but also think about what you're going to say. Like I get it. Like I've done this a couple times and know like the kind of like mental like jujitsu you have to do to like
Well,
make it all
talking to
happen.
me, I mean, Andrew Barris used to say, and this is English people, I wish you all lived in England so I felt more normal with all the Americans, but we say a load of stuff and then qualify it. And so people
Right.
listen to me preach, they go, man, you lay out all these points and there's a point you've had the whole time,
Right, right,
so
right.
so
Yeah,
you're saying
so
you're listening and then you're like, okay, I'm
so
interject.
I've been trying to actually just listen before I speak, especially just when I'm like, encountering people. I go to this coffee shop a couple times a week and, I'll like say hi to the baristas and they're like my friends at this point, because I see them so often. It's like, if I'm going to ask them how their day is, I'm going to like wait to hear before I'm thinking about them asking me how my day is.
Yeah, yeah.
Because what's crazy is like in the simplest thing, like asking someone how their day is, you might find yourself in a life-changing conversation.
Oh yeah.
You might be talking about Jesus before you know it because you actually like were patient enough to listen rather than just get to the point where you talk about yourself or whatever. And so for me, like it's been a ton of listening, songwriting, my growth as a songwriter, my growth as a pastor has been learning to listen, to be patient,
Yeah.
to be more inclusive of other people and collaborate on things. Because when you bring more people in, when you build a community around worship, when you bring other
Yeah.
people to lead it with you, now you have opportunities to hear rather than all these pressures to speak. And it's crazy. Like the less I talk, I feel like the more influence I've gained. And I don't say that as like some sort of like marketing gimmick. It's just like the more I've chosen to withhold.
Yeah.
It's been a
Yeah.
conscious choice,
Yeah.
and to let others speak. The more I've grown and the more I've learned to listen to the Lord and to speak only what he's given me to speak.
And that plays over into even the songwriting idea and all the rest and like
Oh
topics
yeah.
he's yeah.
Oh yeah. And so for me, like that, my relationship with the Lord has been, I used to think in a much more legalistic way of I have to put all these religious practices into place.
Yeah.
And what I've learned is to just to be as good a listener as I can be, because when I'm listening, if I'm truly listening, then I'll hear God say, "Hey, let's talk. You need to confess some things right now." Or, "Hey, like this person like needs some encouragement." Or, "Hey,
Yeah.
like that thing you've not stopped thinking about, keep going. Like you're onto
Yeah.
something."
Yeah.
And it's in those really quiet spaces that I actually feel like my life is, like I said at the beginning, more oriented toward God. And it looks way more simple. It doesn't always just look like I'm some sort of godly person. I'm just living my life.
That is a godly person. I mean, living your life. And I want to qualify some stuff because, the guys that, and I know we shouldn't look to people like it's not idolizing them, but I look at these old revivalists or fiery preachers. And again, for anyone even from our church or who knows me or whatever, I feel a love from people. But for those people like when Brian's intense, as an evangelist, that's how we think.
Right.
We're protective, we're hyper focused on this. But these old school like preachers like Leonard Ravenhill, he'll pray 6 hours a day because there's nothing else he's doing. You know
Right.
what I mean? So it's almost
Right.
like he's not got a Twitter, he's not going out, he's not at the coffee shop,
Yeah.
he's doing whatever. Where for us now, I look at it like, okay, on the way to jiu-jitsu in the morning, there's 20 minutes. Am I listening to worship? Am I talking to someone? What am I doing? And the way a lot of my life unfolds, who's asking me to pray? Brian's
Yeah.
not saying he doesn't pray. I mean, you're at a lot of worship sets. I mean, there was one last night for our church,
Right.
but in your interacting with that. And then I
Yeah.
guess I'd say just outside of that, as well with time, but what are you working on personally now? Because how many albums have you guys worked on now? And what have you put out?
Oh man, I mean, it's crazy. We put out our first album as Branches in 2019.
Yep.
That was a huge marker in my own life too, because I'd never really been a part of something like that. It was a new experience for me, writing songs and putting them out on a church album and a live album, and all this work
Yeah.
went into it. And that came out like 2-3 months before we entered into COVID.
Yeah.
So, what's interesting is that the community at Branches, the songwriting community, the worship community, has grown significantly in the last 3 years. There's more worship leaders than there ever have been.
Yeah.
There's more people who want to collaborate and write songs. Katie, who's on staff with us, her and I are like big songwriting partners. We just write a
Yeah.
ton together. And so honestly, there's like a surplus of songs right now. We were joking last night because we were leading some of the new songs at the worship night. Like, we have more new songs than we can like fit in responsibly, because then it'll just be a bunch of songs nobody knows,
Yeah, yeah. And it's true. That is important that they know a theme to kind of like when I came
Right,
into faith,
right.
that Yes, Lord song or open up the gates. And to me, it's more, I'm just singing about Jesus in public with people singing about Jesus. But
Right, totally, yeah. So, we've been writing a ton of songs. Right now, the whole goal is to figure out like what to do with them. I mean,
yeah,
obviously we're using them in our gatherings. There's some songs that people just really love and love to sing.
yeah,
So it's recording them one way or another and getting them out there so people have them. Me personally, like, I'm just writing a ton more now. Like, I'm trying to collaborate more with other people. I'm trying to collaborate with
mm,
more people in our city.
wow, that's cool.
I'm traveling a little bit here and there to like write with other people. I'm actually going on a trip with Justin Unger to go songwriting in May, which is gonna be
Amazing.
really fun. Um, so yeah, it's for me. I feel like my call in life, kind of at this point and moving forward, is you know less of like trying to make Sundays a cool experience, because Sundays are already a great experience at our church, and
Yeah,
the reason why is because of all the people who go into it, not because of
yeah,
me. Like,
yeah,
there's weekends I'm not there, and it's amazing, and
yeah.
we just have an incredible worship team who wants to like sacrifice and love and serve,
Mm,
and they're all incredibly talented, gifted people. But for me, it's continuing to shepherd that and foster it, and to actually go away and write, and to bring songs out, and to bring songs out of other
mm,
people, and to you know um, kind of create and collaborate, and really foster the culture moving forward, and to just raise up more leaders. Honestly,
yeah.
like, the more the merrier. We have this huge worship team, and people come to me and ask about joining it, and I go, yeah, I mean, the more the merrier. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out how to get you in,
So you
because
guys don't reply to emails though, because I haven't got an email back from anyone. No, I'm saying this because I went to jujitsu again the other day, and the professor there was like 7 or 8 people from our gym that just showed up, and a lot of them listen to the podcast. So what's up, guys, gals? But they came to church for the first time, and in the gym, they were like, I couldn't believe the voices of the people.
Hmm.
And we'll watch, American Idol or whatever, and I'm always just
Right.
like, oh, everyone in our church could win this. And it's not like, and I'm just saying it is pretty crazy. It is pretty
Yeah.
crazy. They're talking about Katie, and you got the keyboard and Mary and everyone else. I mean,
Right.
it is crazy, all you guys that can do that. But
When
yeah,
you
so
find, I think, to me, it's like all of the people who lead worship at our church, we have, I think 7 worship leaders, including myself.
Yeah.
I'm the only one that's full-time on staff. One is part-time. The rest do not get paid. They've all been the paid person at a church at one point or another, and could very well be hired for that job somewhere if they wanted to, but they choose to be here. And I think part of that is because of the culture that exists here and the way that they're valued and the way that their lives are valued, their families are valued, their talents and skills are valued. Like there's no ladder you have to climb up to have access to the highest level of leadership at this church. You want an audience with the worship pastor and the lead pastor, you can have it, you know? And your idea is valued. Your contribution to the community is important. Your voice is important. Your ministry is important. And so I think, there's so many great wins to all of it. One of them is we don't ever have the battle of preferences at our church. There's so many people who could come and say, I like it when you do this. I like it when you do that. Well, there's so many different worship leaders that they can't even do that because everyone's different. Everyone's unique. There's so much variety and diversity on the team as far as like personalities and leadership. And it just makes it not about one person. It's a culture. It's a community. That was Easter. Easter, we all sang in the round and people were just all looking at each other, realizing like the church is the people. Church is the people. We did a normal service and we just did it in a circle. The church was the people.
And for people that are listening, just so you get it, our church, we, use a big space at a giant senior center. I mean, the building that the city owns is like 35 million. So I love that our church is like, why are we going to ever pay for a building when they want us to use it? And so in order to fit more seats in, they kind of did this square in the middle where, our pastor kind of rotated around and spoke. And it was like something out of an old Elvis or, Kurt Cobain, Nirvana thing. But the amazing thing was you get to see people and you guys just worshiped your hearts out. And there was way more people because of that. But I just got that picture of even the mercy seat, how the two angels look at each other. And when God looks down, the mercy and the blood is what's seen, and that worship and the power of it all. And I say that because you could look at that and say, well, look, they're the center. Well, no, the word, the worship, the spirit, it's very humble. And I don't know if you remember this, but when Andrew was planning the church, being sent out from Rock Harbor, one of the things he said is it's good for you when you hear worship songs and they're not your favorite, because it lets you know that you're not the center of worship. God is. Remember Francis Chan's quote, and people would kind of criticize worship at times. He goes, the worship isn't for you, it's to God. Like we all have our preferences. I'm old enough where I'm like, if I can't sing any song to him, I'm the one with the issue anyway. So I'm getting Brian and some of the worship leaders, give your guys worship leaders a break. Go up and encourage them. You know what I mean? I know they love you at our church and everything like that.
Yeah.
But I guess just how would people connect with you? What's the way to hear your music? I know you put some of your old stuff on the end of some podcast back in the day.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. It's funny because I've had this like internal battle with, self-promotion or anything like that. So my Instagram is pretty much like me and my kids and stuff like that. But actually, I've been really wanting to just share music that I've been writing a lot more lately, if not just to have like little snippets out there to encourage people. So I'm actually going to start recording some videos and just some cool things like that and putting them on my Instagram. It's just my name, Brian Albright.
Brian with an I,
yeah, with an I, yeah, and then I might do some TikTok too. I might just hit it up, hang out with all the people younger than me out in TikTok land.
That's what I do, honestly. And I hear Andrew's message. Again, I'm talking about our pastor because I always joke like, he doesn't care about any of that stuff, and he's a good gauge on when you're trying to promote yourself. But he's always said to me, it's almost like the Apostle Paul was boasting in what God was doing in him to point to Christ. If you're putting yourself out there, I mean, there's probably going to be people that message you who really need to talk to you. People that message Austin. So the whole goal of it is you're going to use this gift for him and his glory. Make videos, do stuff. I mean, you got a wife and kids and family to keep you humble, but use the gift to get out there. So Brian Albright, is there a website, or what's the best way just to listen to even the church worship or the albums? Or
you can go to our church website, brancheshb.com. There's a music tab, has all of our albums up there. There's even resources for like chord charts and stuff like that that we've made available. You can also, I have a website, brianalbrightmusic.com. it's just like a landing page of anything that I've kind of been involved in. I actually produce music as well, and I've been producing music for a Spanish artist. He writes Spanish worship artists. His
Wow.
name's Jonathan Castrejon, and he's incredible. And
Wow.
it's honestly like such an honor to like meet him and um, spend hours mixing songs that I can't even understand, but I think they're beautiful and
Oh,
I
it's
know they're for
beautiful.
Jesus. Yeah.
I've been to some
I
when
don't
we go to
speak any
Costa
Spanish.
Rica.
I know barely enough to know, like he'll tell me the title and I'm like, "Oh, it's Jesus, my friend." Okay, cool. Like I got it, you know?
No, but singing along, like we go to Costa Rica and we'll go to that church in Liberia, and they'll
Yeah.
have all the songs in Spanish, but they'll always sing a verse in English for us. But the Spanish is just like you said earlier, when you're all singing together, it doesn't matter what language, it's amazing. But
Right.
the best way to get a hold of you is just Brian Albright on your Instagram, probably inbox you, message you. And I know we've
Yep.
took up, plenty of your time. Your wife was in a moment ago with the kids. We got
Yeah.
this thing going, but any last thoughts? And then if you just pray, and I just want to tell people, guys, life is rough. It's rocky. There's the ups and the downs. Don't get discouraged. Like Brian even said, amazing people that got involved in ministry and they wrote the church off. Why were you really there? That pastor's going through something, that congregation's going through something. I could be the same way looking at individual churches. I'm kind of protective of the gospel. I don't need to be, but I'm saying I want to be Berean about things. I wanted to unpack this interview to help encourage young pastors, maybe older, burned out ones. But I tell you guys, just look at what's in your hand, give it to the Lord, walk in humility, because I really believe this season we're in, the way the world is looking, trying to find solid ground, there is nowhere to look but to Christ. And I always use that John Piper quote: missions exist because worship doesn't. The reason there's evangelism, the reason there was apostles, the reason there's preaching, teaching, there's a cross, it's all to save souls so they become worshipers. So any closing thoughts again, and then pray for us? Or yeah.
Yeah, I would just say my encouragement for people who want to see something better, whether they are just church attenders or they work for the church, is encourage the things that you want to see.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of, and I get it, but people don't know. Some people just don't even know that they're empowered to encourage me as a pastor more than a musician.
Amen.
And
It's powerful.
I have people in my life who do that. And that kind of keeps me grounded rather than people who just encourage me because of my talent as a musician.
Hmm.
Um, but I have hope for the church. I have hope for ministry. I don't, I roll my eyes at the churches that suffer because of leaders that fall and because they have, they
Hmm.
get headlines made about them. But I wrote a song. My son, his name is, named from the song in James chapter 2. It says, "Every good and perfect gift comes from the Father of heavenly lights."
Hmm.
And if I truly believe that the church is from God, then I also believe that the church is inherently good.
Hmm.
So I want to like hold on to that hope and hold on to the hope of Jesus, because I believe that his church is something that's good for this world. And so I want to
Hmm.
commit my life to serving it. And I want to, encourage people who feel that call on themselves to commit their
Hmm.
lives to serving it. Um, there might be negative experiences, but it's because of people and their sin. It's not because of the church that Christ
Amen.
established. And so I'm a believer in the church, and I'll never turn my back on it. I'm committed to not turning my back on it. And if the
Hmm.
Lord calls me out of a job at a church, so be it. But I I'm not I'm not turning my back on his church. I believe in it and its mission, and I think it's a good thing. So
Amen.
yeah.
Gates
Would
of
you like me to
Hades won't
pray?
prevail against it. I mean, it is his bride. She's beautiful, but and I'm telling you, even if someone fell into the craziest of sin, struggle with whatever, I am for that person, reconciliation, the rest. We're
Mhm.
protectors, but yeah, the bride of Christ, she's beautiful. So yes, please pray for whatever is on your
Yes.
heart.
Yes, Lord. Well, we just thank you, Lord, that you are good, and we thank you that we can trust in you. We can trust in
Yes.
your word. Um, Lord, we can trust that you're at work in a world that we can't control, a world that often brings chaos and confusion. And Lord, I just thank you for the perspectives that we can gain just through conversation, the ways that you can sharpen one another, that we can be sharpened by one another just through anecdotes and experiences and even encouragement and sharing the truth with one another, Lord. And I just pray, Lord, that that those who listen to this would hear from you, and that they would just be encouraged to seek you, to dwell in your presence, to be listeners of you, Lord, to take in and let your word inhabit their souls so that it may have a transformational work, Lord. I thank you for what you've done in my life and the life of Brian, and I just pray, Lord, that you would bless the audience of this show, that you would just continue to have your will be done, and to allow us the honor of participating and serving you in it, Lord. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Jesus' name, amen. And I'm realizing that, I think I've had more Brians on this show than anyone else. You got me, you, Brian Broderson, Brian Welch.
I think it's a little biased now.
It is a little biased now. I get some hate in the comments, folks. No, but I want to close on just this thought, you guys. I started with that picture in Luke 10 of Mary and Martha. And the amazing thing in that story is Mary fell at his feet, obviously worshiping him as Lord, but Martha also called him Lord. Do you know Jesus? Do you have a relationship? Brian began that relationship as a teenager, and it was through music. And ultimately, it came down to him knowing his need for redemption and forgiveness through the work of Jesus on the cross. You've heard me many times, divorce, suicidal, hating life. I mean, here we are podcasting about Jesus. The church, the community, as Brian just said, it all exists because it's on mission. As Jesus said himself, I came to seek and save that which was lost. The Spirit of God comes into the world to convict it, and he lets you know, man, God is so big and loving. He sent his son to die for you. You might have heard this story your whole life, but do you have a personal relationship with Jesus? Can you stand alongside of us and worship? Will you be there at the marriage in heaven? So guys, thanks for tuning in. Thank you, brother. It's amazing hearing all of this. It's just your perspective pastorally helps me understand things. I can only imagine what it's doing for people who are unaware of what a worship pastor even looks like, or where they are in some trench mad at God or someone else. But guys, Paul wrote to us in 1 Corinthians 1:18, and he said, the message of the cross is foolishness to those that are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it's the power of God. God's power, his grace and mercy went forth in the earth because he loved us so much. It's a free gift. Thank you guys for tuning in. Hit up Pastor Brian. You'll be blessed, and he'll make time to hit you up as well. And thank you guys. Like, share, all that goofy stuff I don't want to talk about, but it does reach people. God bless. Love you, brother. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Amen.